All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our AMA today here at Techstars with David Cohen and the authors of Get Backed. Before we go ahead and get started, I just want to let you know we have a live chat area that you can use to put anything you need help with during this session. If you have any questions, please go ahead and submit them into the question section for the speakers to see and answer. Also, this session will be recorded afterwards, and so you can replay at any time. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to David Cohen.
Great. Hey, Evan and Evan, thanks for hanging out with us today.
Thank you.
Hey. You know, I have the book here with me, Get Backed. I think this is awesome. I love books that are data-oriented and have a lot of facts and sort of, pitch decks you can see and stuff. So I'm really glad that you guys put this out. I do have one question, I guess a little bit of a complaint. I don't know why Barbara, gets on the front cover with her, Barbara Cochran and her quote, where I'm relegated to page 1 here with my endorsement of the book. Maybe you could explain a little bit about how that sort of mistakenly happened.
We've got a direct line for the publisher. They manage all that, so you can check it out with them. We had no role in that, David.
Okay, so you're just abdicating responsibility completely for this egregious error.
It is not our fault, but I would say this: if you were on national television at least once a week with millions of viewers, they might have made the decision differently.
I see. Well, I mean, great job on the book. I'm thrilled to be buried on page 1. It's amazing content for anybody that's thinking about how to pitch their ideas or startup. I saw a couple of interesting Techstars references in there. A couple of the companies you picked out. I think Freight Farms and Karma to kind of share their pitch decks and their results. And I love how you laid it out. Talk a little bit about what people can learn from, for example, these pitch decks and real examples that you have in the book.
Well, one of the challenges that I think a lot of first-time founders face when they're trying to raise money is, well, how did you raise money, and what did you put in front of investors? And so with the book, we thought it was really important to show 15 pitch decks that raised over $150 million and show would-be and future entrepreneurs exactly how the founders raised the capital. And we try to do that through a lot of different industries and a lot of different stages of companies, so you can kind of self-identify probably the best strategy for you to raise money for your venture. So Freight Farms is an amazing example. That was a Techstars company. They're kind of smattered throughout there, and we just pulled out the best slides that we thought were most representative of the company succeeding to raise money.
Yeah, storytelling is so important, right? It's part of what we teach in the accelerator as well. It's the personal connection to the thing, the origin story. I know you talk a lot in the book about origin stories. I'm a huge fan of always hearing about the why. How did the founders get together? Why are they doing this? Tell us a little bit about some of the origin stories that maybe you wrote about or that you think were particularly interesting.
Well, it's funny. We were just coming out of a meeting earlier today, literally with a gold medalist, an Olympian who has a gold medal, and he's building a business. And we were talking with him about how that feature of his history comes up in his pitches. And it's really interesting. He was saying that actually he's really nervous to bring it up. He doesn't like to do so because he feels like he's bragging about it. And we got to work with him to brainstorm around how, there's probably no more interesting subject line of an email than have 30 minutes for a gold medalist, ? In terms of making the introduction. And so, our counsel is not to say, hey, come in and be arrogant and braggadocious about how awesome you are, but bringing forward an authentic story of why you started that company. So everyone knows about the concept of product market fit. We like the concept of founder company fit, which is like, why are you, as a person with your history and your experiences, a unique and capable person to build that business? In our experience, investors love to hear that story and to be part of it.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree. I mean, as an investor, I'm involved in about 800 companies. One of the first questions I always ask founders is, why are you doing this? Right? And if the answer is, well, it's a good business, it comes from a spreadsheet, that's hard to get excited about. And if they can tie it to their past, I mean, one of my favorite examples from the accelerator real quick is this company ScriptPad that he's creating electronic prescription pads instead of the written notes that our doctors use. His father was almost killed by a poorly written prescription. The wrong drug got given. And he was pissed off about it, right? And I wanted to understand where they were coming from and why they were doing the thing they were doing. So I think that origin story really, really important. One more question for you. I know you shared one of our big secrets, the Jedi mind trick from Techstars. Tell me what you think of that, and maybe tell people what that is.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. When you're pitching for capital, or you're kind of pre-fundraising and you're asking for advice, one of the most important things to do with an investor is to be playful and to kind of incite a really good conversation. And one of the takeaways for us when we were interviewing hundreds of founders for this book to find out what they did was something that Techstars does, and they trained you to do something called the Jedi mind trick, which literally means what's the one question that you want the investor to ask after you give them your elevator pitch. And so it's a really helpful exercise for any founder to kind of begin the process of having a good conversation. And you know this, David, since you've invested in 800 companies, which I think is ridiculous, but it's amazing. I'm a little jealous. Is when you're in front of an investor, a pitch has less to do with you giving a really clean and crisp monologue. It has everything to do with allowing the investor to kind of see how you think and having more of a conversation. It's like tennis. You hit the ball over, they ask a question, you hit it back. So I think the Jedi mind trick is a really good kind of a way to get the best out of a conversation.
And, that was a misconception I had about how to raise capital. I assumed that when you go pitch specifically someone on Sand Hill Road at a venture capital firm, it would look like a demo day where you're maybe even standing up in front of a screen and pitching formally to a lot of people. I've now raised tens of millions of dollars from venture firms. In our last round, about 6 months ago, we probably met with about 40 firms. And in at least 2/3 of those meetings, we literally didn't even put slides up. And so you're seated across the table from someone, and the opening line is, hey, enjoyed reading through your deck. Tell me a little bit about why you guys started this business. And so that's a much more conversational approach that helps you build rapport and trust with the investor, which looks a lot different than what I used to think it was, which was this formal presentation of a pitch deck.
Couldn't agree more. And we just raised a new venture fund, $150 million fund. Same thing with the LPs. We would walk in, they've already seen the deck. It wasn't stand up in front of the room, and just talk for 20 minutes. It was, actually, one of the things we teach is bring the deck printed out. It's very old school, but you can hand that to them. They can make notes, and you can refer to it and use it as a tool, but you don't have to let it drive the conversation.
Yeah, one of my early awkward fundraising memories was it was actually for a nonprofit that I'm on the board of, and we went to meet with an extremely wealthy man and family office in Colorado. And I had this beautiful deck prepared. I had multiple adapters for my laptop to make sure I'd be able to have the presentation. And I'm escorted into this beautiful receiving room where we would meet. And I'm looking around, and there's taxidermy and overstuffed leather couches, and not a whiteboard and not a TV in the room. And I'm just sitting there thinking wait, I had this whole thing ready to go. And sure enough, he walks in and he's like, do you want a cup of coffee? And I was not prepared for that meeting.
Yep. Yeah, if you have it printed out, you're ready for anything, right? And the screen doesn't have to be the focus, you get to be the focus. So I think totally different from a demo day where you're in front of 1,000 people, right? This is much more personal, so great feedback. One last thing, and then we'll take some questions. We have a bunch of questions rolling in, and I know they want to hear your thoughts on that stuff, but I have one more I'm going to use moderator's privilege on. I love the idea in the book of the Lux surface area. I want you to talk a little bit about that and help people understand that. I think that was one of the most valuable nuggets for me in the book.
I'll riff on this for a second, and then I'm sure Bear will have some thoughts as well. I mean, when a founder is trying to raise money, a lot of times it's a math problem, right? Let's just say you meet with 100 potential investors. Out of those 100 investors, you might have 25 that are like, yeah, this is interesting. Send me more information. So you immediately gone from 100 down to 25, and then from 25, I'd be hard pressed if you got 10 to invest, or maybe even 5. So the challenge for first-time founders raising money is a math problem in the sense that you've got to get in front of a lot of investors, and to what you're talking about, David, increase your Lux surface area, the probability that you're going to be able to raise the capital to do it. And what we talk about in the book is giving people kind of a toolkit to increase their luck surface area really fast, and we call it the friendship loop. And it's this process of bridging to investors, building relationships, delighting and inviting people. And the best fundraisers from our research are the people that are really fast at building rapport and asking for an introduction to new people and kind of solving the math problem that is fundraising. So that's my take on the luck surface area.
Yeah, I might just throw in the mix. One thing I always fall into personally is during a raise, before we've closed it, I get almost embarrassed about how the round is coming together, that it's kind of taking longer than I thought. And I go into this mode where I want to hibernate and not tell people who want to help me about what I need or about how it's going. And so we really think it's wise to over-communicate, especially to a group of friends, former professors, advisors, previous co-founders of companies. You need to over-communicate to them about how your venture's going. You need to state clearly what it is that you need and how they can help. And often we find that we get in this rut of thinking that if I ask you for something, it is me extracting something from you. But in a lot of cases, if I ask you for something, it's creating the opportunity for you to really help me. And so just getting out of that mindset of burrowing down into your hole and coming forward and saying, who's important to me, how can I express to them my gratitude for that and let them know how they can be helpful.
Very cool, and you can read more about that and get back. I think awesome topic. I actually think there's an echo on the line. Thanks. I think that was just fixed. The thing that people forget, I've always wanted to write this blog post but never gotten around to it, is what I call between the yes and the close. So don't forget also that the people that are most likely and most willing to be helpful are the people that have already committed. And you need to over-communicate with them too and tell them what you need, because now you're in the same boat and people forget to do that and they just don't communicate well in that interim period.
That's a really good point.
Let's jump to some of the questions we have. In case you feel free to interrupt if you see a good one come in that I'm not seeing. I think you're more on top of the stream, but there's 8 votes. By the way, there's 259 people hanging out with us, and of course we'll share this and it'll be seen by many more. But the first question, I would like to hear your thoughts on the prospects of seed fundraising for a startup that has a working prototype of an app but needs funding for further development to get to launch. What factors are most important in that situation in your mind? Basically, pre-traction, product not in the market yet.
Yeah, a quick stab at this. So pre-traction, it reminds me of Rumsfeld's line about the difference between the known knowns and the unknown knowns. And so I think what's important to understand with pre-traction is, do you mean that you tried to get traction and you couldn't, so actually you just have bad news to report, or is it that you don't even have the condition for the possibility of knowing if you had traction? So like if it's a complex product that must have some threshold of an MVP to even enable the sale to work, like in your example earlier of like writing electronic scripts, I mean, that's a pretty hefty MVP to even be able to know if it's going to work. Here, I think Eric Ries in Lean Startup World has some great stuff to say about how to book some really easy wins in terms of estimating or guessing at traction. So do you have a paper prototype? Have you created ads to drive to fake landing pages? Do you have some idea of what cost of acquisition would look like for the app? The equation, and David, you're the real pro at this, equation that I think a lot about for consumer internet and app companies is the relationship between the customer acquisition cost and the lifetime value of the customer. And so showing that you've made diligent efforts through very lean MVPs to collect data around what's your cost of acquisition going to be, meaning how much money are you spending in time or direct ad spend to drive a download or install or monthly active user for that app, relative to the lifetime value of the customer, which is generally broken into the profit, so revenues minus costs for delivering it, times the churn. So is there a sense that you'd have that customer coming back and back over and over again? So I think what you want to come in with, Mike Maples, an investor of mine, has a great line. He says, instead of trying to lay out egregious forecasts that investors certainly know are not true, he says, be awesome and syndicate the truth. Yep. And so in that sense, I think really making a point to communicate to the investor what you have done and what you learned from that, not what you will do and what you hope will happen.
I didn't know you were a thunder lizard. That's awesome. In Mike's world, he's great.
We're a lizard. We're still trying.
You're trying to thunder it. Yeah. So I think, you know, great points there. When I get asked this question, I think about things a little bit differently sometimes, and you know, it does depend on stage. And I think I'm assuming this question is coming more from the, you know, we just need more capital to develop the product. And you know, my first question to that is, really, why? Right? Is there not a developer that you can get excited about your vision that's willing to do this and make some progress? Can't you run through that brick wall a little bit and get those first customers, or you know, get those early users on the platform and generate some traction? And in my view, that's what the best entrepreneurs do. Now, if the product is super R&D heavy, I get it. But in the world we live in, on the internet, a lot of times you can get that MVP out there without having to raise capital. And so I ask why to find out where that's coming from. But next question we have from Joshua. Again, a little bit of traction talk here. What are your thoughts on what it means for a startup to display traction in a few different market scenarios? So, for example, if we're solving a known difficult problem, like improving chronic health issues for somebody, I guess that's their example, would it be sufficient to show traction in the effectiveness of the solution, or do you have to have real test patients? You know, essentially the question is, where do investors tend to come in the early stage? With what level of traction do they tend to engage? That seems to be the question from Josh.
Well, real quick from my perspective, the investors, the best form of traction, period, is sales, right? And a lot of times we don't have that privilege, and so if we can't show sales, then we can show other metrics that, you know, are compelling, hopefully, for our business model. Users, growth, efficacy. It sounds like you're in the healthcare space, so, you know, look, we have 10 people that are really benefiting, that have chronic conditions, you know, that are using our app or our technology. So I think it's incumbent on, like, the founder to move from really unattractive traction, which is like a news article and maybe some like a press release, which is just kind of evidence that you may be onto something, and go as far as you can before you need to raise money, if you need to raise money, towards like sales. So the answer is, as far as you can possibly get, is what the investors are typically looking for, which would be, you know, sales. And if you can't do that, then users and growth.
Yeah, it depends on the type of product, right? A little bit, obviously. If it's not something you're selling for dollars, right, and it's maybe more user engagement. Cool. I read ahead of this, a question from Cuba in Boulder, represent, who you know, wants to know how much do investors care, or how much do you have to show that you're really going to stick to it for the long haul? And I wrote a blog post recently called "Giving Up the Ghost." I think that was the name of it, where I'm encountering a lot of entrepreneurs that a year in, they don't have that hockey stick, they've raised a seed round, they give up, maybe move on to the next thing, right? And my mindset as an investor is, I want to know that you're in it for 5 to 10 years. How do you demonstrate that commitment? You know, because everyone's saying it, right? How do you help investors understand that you're truly passionate, you truly care about this thing, and you're going to be there for the long haul?
A practical example, and then one experience that I went through myself on this. I think for me, this ties to origin story. So the more authentic you are as a founder of the company, to show that, you know, this is who you are. So this Olympian we were meeting with earlier, like the company he's building is the perfect manifestation of his Olympic career as a company. So it's like really natural for him to be really passionate about that. Number two, I'd say we see people trying to raise money while currently working somewhere else, which I think is a huge negative sign. Like, if you really believed in the equity value of this thing you're building, you would at least be all in personally in terms of how you spend your time. I don't know, this might be contrarian, but in my own experience, so my co-founder of Outbox and I had this situation after getting a big part of the business shut down by the federal government, of having money available to spend and actually reaching the decision to shut down the company early. And I believe it was the right decision. People can argue different ways about it, but I will say, in those moments of conversations with the investors, communicating really early being fully open and honest about the data, genuinely seeking their feedback and interpretation of what they think is the right thing to do, especially as you get more towards your board members. So I think there is something where investors don't want you to be so blind to the challenges of building the business that you'll just like run it off a cliff. But you're certainly right in the question too. I think early stage investing is a lot about investing in a person who is going to be just a maniac about making that business just awesome. So how do you bring forward your maniacness in the meeting to show that you are just all in on this business is critical.
And one thing that I've seen that I think is probably going to happen more readily in the years to come are large venture capital funds or even small venture capital funds actually doing like psychological tests on the founders to kind of find out where they map on grit and some of these factors that have been proven statistically to like dramatically increase the odds of success. And so if you know, I'm not a futurist, but I can see this happening in the next couple of years. And I think all investors are probably going to get on your LinkedIn profile, and if what they see is 6 months, 9 months, 1 year, they're probably going to be thinking this guy's a hacker and he's just going to be in and out of this thing. And you know, I don't think he's going to be in for the long haul. So something to be aware of as well.
Yeah, for me, just my quick answer to it would be. We really look to identify the source of passion, as we call it. Everyone will say you're passionate. We want to know where is that coming from, right? Like tell me again back to the why that we talked about earlier. And so you know we push really hard on that. And I think when people are genuinely sharing a vision of the future of the world and genuinely committed to that vision, right? That's where we get excited. There's a question here, essentially from someone who really is saying, you know, I'm doing a startup, but really I don't have business skills, whatever that means. Maybe I view myself as very technical. You know, I've got an interesting prototype, but you know, I really don't have a lot of business skills. How do I go out, you know, someone like me, right, and pitch my ideas and get someone to believe in me as a seed investor?
Two things jump out to me on this. I think there are two issues here. Number one is if you're a non-business person, I do think it's teachable how to raise money. And so we see this a lot. There's very capable people who would be great at running a team or great at building a product, but they just don't understand how to raise capital. And that's honestly, in large part, why we wrote the book, was to teach that skill. So if it's that you think you can run the business, but you're a little bit nervous, hey, getback.com. Thank you, David. But you're not certain you can raise capital, that's probably teachable. If it's more like you're a heavy science person and you just love the product, but like you've never seen a balance sheet, you get nervous about accounting, a lot of this seems uncertain to you, then that's probably a case where some kind of co-founder situation could be a really great complement to you, because at the end of the day, you need the product, but you also really need the business. Both are sufficient, both are necessary but not sufficient to make the business work.
Yep. Okay. Let's see. There's a good one here that I know you talk about in the book, so this is going to tee it up pretty easily for you. You know, with markets starting to crash and you know the market changing, one of the entrepreneurs here is just saying, look, I need help understanding where do I find these investors. They're hard to find, and I know you have a bunch of sections in the book about accelerators, about AngelList. And maybe you could just, you know, that's a very high level question, but there's people out there that just don't know where to look for these investors. Where do they start?
Well, my position on this is they're actually real easy to find. There are lists of them that you can buy and purchase. So I would say generally that access to investors is easy, and the ability to get introduced and build relationships with them is hard. So we know who they are. They're literally all over the place, and you can buy a list of the wealthiest people in the U.S. on a website called the Rich Register. So I would give a little bit of pushback on I don't know who they are, and say that we do know who they are, and they're all over the place, and there's AngelList and all that kind of thing like that. Really, what this comes down to, I think, is if I were coaching this founder with this situation, is they need to learn the skill set of building relationships and rapport with people. When you meet with somebody, even if they're not an investor, and they like you and your idea, they're probably going to introduce you to a couple of people, and then that begins you on your journey of getting introduced to a couple more people and a couple more people, and then you finally meet enough, you hit the critical mass to meet a threshold of investment capital. So it sounds like a problem of rapport building and like relationship building, not, I actually don't know investors because they're known.
And something we walk through in the book is there's two different approaches here. You can take a top-down approach, which is to say the best investors on AngelList or CB Insights is another great tool. Who are my dream list? Andreessen or Founders Fund, whatever. That is a good approach. It can be really hard to get to those people. We also like to lay out the bottom-up approach, which is to think about what is the shape of your existing network. So are there people in your neighborhood, your alumni network, that you go to church with, that your parents are friends with, that you once met because they gave the commencement speech at your high school graduation. So a lot of this, who can I go to for an investment, really has to do with who you are. We can't really make introductions for you, or we could, but what's important is who is going to take you seriously. It's probably someone that's 1 degree removed from you in your network. So going through that mapping activity to just get creative and thinking about your network and who in your network can introduce you to the right people is really fruitful.
Awesome. So we have about 2 minutes left, I think. I'm gonna do rapid fire here on a couple of good questions that I want to get to. One is from Lee, who asked a simple question. Hey guys, love the book. Any chance you'd offer a discount to entrepreneurs that are out there that are broke?
Yes.
Yes.
We have like a 25% Amazon discount, but Lee, email us and we'll send you a free PDF copy, okay?
And they should go to getback.com.
Exactly.
Is that right? Okay. And one other really good question I thought, there's some of us are out there working on nonprofits. Do you think that your book really applies in the nonprofit situation, and how might that be different? Have you thought about that at all?
Personally, I think it absolutely applies, and we had a kind of a jump ball in the middle of writing this book if we should just include for-profits or include kind of a blend of for-profits and nonprofits. But actually, a lot of our case studies in the book, specifically the one on charity water, is, I think, applicable to any nonprofit trying to raise money. The dynamics are different because you're talking to a different set of targets, so to speak, but the process is very similar.
Awesome. Well, in the stream, just so you guys know, lots of compliments on the book, lots of people that have already checked it out. I'm sure lots more that will. There's a bunch of questions we did not get to. A lot of them were really highly related to Techstars, and I didn't want to take the time with you guys to hit those, but Casey, maybe we could have another AMA and sort of focus on some of those questions. But I'll let you wrap it up. Thanks for the time, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, well, maybe just end with this. We really believe that the pitch deck is the modern business plan. And it's an instrument not just used for going out and raising capital. It's an instrument that helps you facilitate good conversations with all kinds of people relevant to your business, potential partners, certainly investors, employees, landlords for your office, all kinds of people. So anyway, we love and hope you create a pitch deck, use it to refine your idea, and we think it'll help you get funded and get the business off to the races.
Cool. Well, thanks, David, Evan, for joining us, and thanks everyone online for joining us today. There's a lot of great questions. We may take some of those and answer them in blog series coming up. And also just want to say we'll be having more AMAs like this. David has promised us that we'd have some of these at least monthly, and hopefully we can talk with Evan again soon about their book. We'll be sending a recording of this afterwards, and we'll send more details about how you can get backed and talk to the authors about it. And so stay tuned, follow us online on Techstars, on Twitter, and we'll release the dates for the next AMAs. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Get shit done. Perfect.